Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another edition of the Gray Area here on the Black Man Unfiltered Network, also simulcasting on the Sparta HQ Network. I am Mr. Bennett with my partner, as always,
This is Sparta!
the Ghost of Sparta, aka Peter, aka Panagiotis. Yasu, my brother, what is going on?
What is going on, my man? How are you tonight?
I am doing good. I'm doing good. I might have dodged a bullet. I was supposed to be on a flight 6 a.m. tomorrow morning, but I got canceled. Boss pulled me back in, so I'm local, certainly in Jersey this week, so no travel, and we'll play it by ear. Whether or not I'm needed in that area or not, it's going to be, I think, a little bit more strategic now as we get closer to the project winding down. So yeah, so I'm going to be chilling here, local, but still, getting the work done. One thing that doing all this travel, it really doesn't matter, whether you're in the office or not. I mean, people make a big deal about in office, out of office. It's like, look, I work with partners and colleagues all over the world, and so does it really matter that you're in an office necessarily? In some occasions, yeah, it's good to work collaboratively. But certain fields or whatnot, not as much. They make a big hoo-ha about it. But I think there's other reasons for that. There might be more financial, more so than anything, that these corporations are wanting, tax write-offs and stuff like that. So that's just my opinion. But they'll always.
In your case, because I was thinking, I know we were talking about it before the show started. But also, I know you have responsibilities and everything, like we're saying in the back of the show. But also, you don't have to worry about finding the gym now for working out. Like, you can just work out.
Yeah, I love, and it's weird because it feels like, because I had to modify my training, just with the travel and everything. In fact, I was even going to look for a gym down in that area next time I went down. But it's just amazing. You're away from the gym for a couple, or at least not doing your routine. Not to say I never left the gym or training, but I had to modify it just given my travel schedule. And it's just amazing how much you lose, or you feel kind of set back when you're not doing things. I did a serious standalone leg workout for the first time in weeks, and it was like as if I never lifted at all. So I need to definitely build my legs back up and just get back into my routine of things, whatever. So so certainly being at home would certainly be a benefit as far as getting that back.
I was going to talk about this at some point this week, but good chances today. Actually, next week I'm actually going back to the gym after the shit show I was at my other job.
Yeah,
I lost again when I got transferred now, so I'm gonna have more time to go to the gym. So this week I'm just trying to get my feet wet in the water to see what kind of shit show I'm walking into, because I already know it's a shit show. When I met with the director, I was like, she goes, "You're walking to a shit show. Nobody knows how to cook in here." I'm like, "What?" I'm like, they were cooking pasta for 2 hours.
Wow.
I'm like, no, we're not doing that. They're going to have a wide awakening. I had to start backing the whip.
I hear you. But for those who are coming in, so again, we got Marianne Constantine in the bill tonight. Thank you for joining us as always. Thank you for your support. And just everyone, as you come in, make sure you hit the like button again on both platforms. Both head over to the Sparta HQ network and certainly on the BMU network. Consider becoming a subscriber to both networks. And certainly, if you're moved to, drop a Cash App or a Super Chat to the Black Man Unfiltered Network. And I know Sparta HQ is going to be monetized very soon. And anything that you want to give us personally, certainly here is our individual Cash Apps. You can certainly, we'd appreciate any support that you want to give us personally. But yeah, man, let's get into this, man. I mean, the reason, I brought up this topic because since the show started, and we're going on it's close to 2 years now. I mean, it's been so long since.
Because I started my channel yesterday. Was actually the 3-year anniversary since I started the channel. So we started this right a little bit about a year into my channel. So yeah, we're going on 2 years pretty much now.
Right, and in that time, we've basically covered a lot of sort of life cycles. Right, we talked about dating. We've talked about marriage. We've talked about having children, raising children. We've talked about taking care of parents, elderly care. We've talked about when a parent dies and funeral costs and things of that nature. So we've kind of gone all over these things. And one thing that we really didn't touch on is divorce. And so I figured, just to sort of finish the cycle, even though it's not one that people want to talk about, just like people don't want to talk about death. You don't want to talk about life insurance or burial plots or anything like that. But divorce is, unfortunately, and some people may say fortunately, an aspect of life that certainly deserves some consideration. And what I did ahead of time of the show, because again, I really didn't pay much attention to it, but I really got into the stats. And as you guys know, I'm a bit of a stat head. I love having data. I love having numbers, and the reason I do that is partly to kind of set the conversation. Now, again, you can disagree or with the facts or the statements or what have you. That's not the point to say, okay, this is gospel. But I think what it does is it kind of helps to kind of set level set the conversation that we want to have. So I like to kind of go off of some information before I say something, not to speak out of ignorance on a particular thing. So that's what I did. So as I was just putting this together tonight, this is probably the biggest slide deck I ever put together. So I wanted to spend some time just kind of going over it a little bit, and then we can have a general conversation getting into more.
Before we get into the slides, I want to ask you this question, because you've been married 29 years now. So
well, now my 29th, don't jinx me. This is our 29th season. We have 5 months to 5 months to go. 5 months and 5 days before season 29 comes to a close. So I like to keep the pressure on. So yeah.
So my question is to you: in all these years been married, I'll keep it simple, so I'm not putting numbers out there for you guys. Did you ever think at one point in your marriage, like, damn, this might be the end of it, my marriage? Like, you thought we might hit the divorce, but you end up fixing it, obviously. Did you ever think that?
From me, honestly, yes. And it was in that period again, and I blame myself for that, because a lot of it had to do with my own immaturity and my own selfishness at the time. So this is basically, I think this is not too, maybe a year or two into, we had we had 3 kids in 4 years, and that dynamic changed our relationship drastically. And it was such where, her demands for what she needed to do was such where I didn't feel my demands were getting met. Again, selfish on my part, not being empathetic enough to, yes, we all have needs, but I wasn't necessarily sensitive to what her needs were at the particular time. And so, certainly, and again, back then also, I was immature in that I would let things just linger for, like, we would go into like 2-3 week sessions where we didn't talk to each other for long periods of time. I mean, just totally, I went into my man cave and we just talked only functionally what needed to be said. And just, it took us weeks to get to resolution. It's interesting because we had a little bit of a spiff yesterday, but it was resolved like within hours, less than a couple hours, in that not holding things in, just kind of getting what needs to be said on the table, and having, at least, even though we still disagree to an extent, understanding what the other person was communicating and what the thought process was. And it allows us to kind of resolve things much quicker, so we're not having the cold, the cold shoulder. We're not having the long cold wars the way we did in the first few years of our marriage. So I think, so I think it's certainly something that, and I heard it says that everybody at some point in a marriage, you think about divorce. The thing is, you just don't want both people thinking about divorce at the same time.
Yeah. One thing I want to say this, and then we'll go into the slides. I know I always speak about CQ and yourself as like my example of marriages. I know I spoke to CQ. I know I put his business out. Like, if there are points at his marriage, he's just like, this might be it. This might be the end of it. And they end up always working it out. And communication is such a key factor on any relationship. I don't care if it's friendship, marriage, business, YouTube, whatever. Like, I know this is gonna sound so cliche. Even our friendship, me and you, Paul, we have great communication. Our, guys on the BMU side and Spartan Institute Network, we all have great communication, and that's one thing I am very proud to say we do really well.
Yeah, but communication is only part of it. To an extent, I think communication is overrated. To an extent. And the reason why I say overrated is you can state your cases very clearly and where everybody understands each other. But the second half of communication is, what we going to do? And I've seen a lot of people who can't get past that, to say you recognize and see where the pain points are or whatever, but is there the willingness to do something about it, to make some behavioral modifications, the way you do things in order for it to happen. Otherwise, it's just talk at the end of the day. And that's why people talk about, oh, we've been in counseling for years. We go to therapists and we talk and we just can't get, because somebody just is refusing to bend, or both parties are just not willing to bend to the point to put the benefit of the marriage above their own self-interest. And so that is so that's that other half. Yes, communication is a tool, but ultimately the work still needs to be done. And if you're not willing to put that work in, you could be talking and talking and talking, and you keep coming back to the same issue, the same, the same points get repeated over and over again. But so it's like, so something is in the process that's just not being worked out or communicated. That has been communicated, but just something just saying, okay, right, I can give on this, just like any kind of business deal or negotiation. Marriage, I think, to a large point, does involve some negotiation. And I think that for those who are just unwilling to let go of some demands, then yeah, I think for a lot of those people, divorce is going to be inevitable. Because neither side wants to give. They say in a good deal is one where people think that they got either more than they was hoping for, or both sides don't think they were taken advantage of. So I just think those are things that really marriage is similar in that regard, that you have to sort of treat it. I wouldn't say like quote unquote like a business. But I think it does require people to say, okay, this is what I'm willing to do, and can we work something out? And I think as long as that's there, then I think you can, even though you do hit those rocky moments, you can get past, certain things that otherwise, you would have divorced over. And, but yeah, I think more times than not, people, you may get to that point, but, like I said, as long as you guys are willing to actually do things or change your mindset, I think it's possible to get over that.
Okay. And I agree 100% what you're saying. Like, it's a little bit of everything, I think. It's a combination of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Because you need to have all the puzzles together. Like, you put the puzzles together. And once you figure that puzzle, you can have a great marriage.
Well, sometimes you're going to have to take sometimes you're going to have to make the puzzle simpler, right? The puzzle may not be completed. Like, I don't know if you ever worked on a puzzle, like those 500-piece puzzles, 1,000-piece puzzles, or whatever.
The 3D ones.
Yeah. Sometimes it's like, look, we may not get this whole puzzle together, but when I look back at the puzzle, does it look kind of halfway like what I was trying to put together? And you might have to live with that, or simplify the puzzle. You know what I mean? Make it 100 pieces, 50 pieces, or whatever. Like I said, find out what you can live without, and then get rid of it if you wanted to, if you want to work. But again, sometimes more is not better. And the more puzzle pieces that you have to constantly be figuring out, let's get back to some basic fundamental things. And that, is part of the spat that we had last night after, we've been together 29 years. There's some things that, we shouldn't be talking about 29 years in. We should know each other to such an extent where it just, there should be almost like a vibe that it shouldn't be there. But, but those are things, again, you can't take for granted either. You still have to work things out. And if something has to be restated, then you restate it. But yeah, I mean, that's something too, that, don't expect every puzzle piece to look together. But yeah, if I stood 10 feet from it and it looks like a horse or whatever the conception of it is, then you know what? I'm like, I'm good with that. There's a lot of puzzles I never finished, but we got some major pieces of it done, and I'm good with that.
And that's the greatest part, because you guys figured it out. That's what comes down to it. Like, it could be such a stupid habit. Like, why are you streaming every night, or why do you have to go to the gym or work out? Whatever it is, you guys can figure it out.
Yeah, for sure. But let's get into some of this. So again, I got a lot of slides on the deck, and I just want to kind of level set some of this conversation, because again, there were certain things that I was surprised about, and again, I did not understand, because again, it's not like I spent a lot of time talking about divorce, obviously, but there's certain things that I didn't necessarily get, but I found these stat points very interesting. So I drew from various sources when it came to how divorce is even calculated. Like, because the thing that's been said for years, you know, is, oh, U.S. is like a 50% divorce rate. It's over 50% divorce rate in America. And that's been something that's just been beat in. But how do people come to these numbers? You know, is something that I was always somewhat curious about. So then I checked a few sites, and they're all correlated. So how do we measure divorce rates? So there's 3 different ways that you measure divorce rates. And so the one that's most common, I'm not going to read all of this, right? But the one that's most common is what's called the crude divorce rate. And basically all you're doing is, for a given year, you're taking the number of divorces in that year and dividing it by 1,000. That's it. I mean, that's so again, how many divorces per 1,000 people? And you can see the chart here, you know, so certainly there was a bubble in the 70s. And we'll talk about why that bubble occurred, but yeah, it definitely escalated in the 70s and whatnot. But what's been happening as of late, and again, several sites correlate that it's been dropped. Divorce rates have actually been dropping in the U.S. for the last 20 plus years. Mm-hmm. And so, but as far as this rate here that they're using, and this is done for even global metrics. So again, the problem with it is, again, you're taking into account the whole population. So you're talking about children, you're talking about single people who cannot divorce, but you're just measuring that as a statistic against the entire population. So a lot of divorce stats that you'll see when you're doing the research, they use they use this one, but the numbers will be like, I think America right now is like 2.5 or 2.7 divorces per 1,000 people. You know, the second one that they have is what's called, slide going, this is the refined divorce rate. So with this one, mm-hmm. They take the married people, which makes sense, right? You look at the married population and you look at the number of divorces in a given year and divide that by the number of married men and married women in that year. Right. So again, you know, so this here has a more accurate number. But even you see here in 1980, the highest it ever got was 22.6%. So not the 50% that everybody, you know, again, likes to cite or like to quote. You're dealing with the people that really matter, which is the married people. In this case in particular, the married women. And so you get a metric that's certainly higher than the crude rate. But again, it's not nearly where it was. So these rates have been taken into account from 1960 to 2018. And it says here, the refined divorce rate, it gives us a much better of divorces that occurred in the country. However, the divorce rate can be studied not only in terms of numbers, but also in the average length of marriages or even by age of divorce. So even this one, it has its flaws because, again, both like the crude rate and the refined rate, they're only looking at the statistic year to year. But what they're suggesting here is there's a third method for calculating divorce rates that kind of calculates over a length of a marriage. So you have here the third one, which is, again, the shares of marriage ending in divorce. And with this one, you're basically looking at a population in a decade. So the way they did it is they took statistics from the 50s through the 90s, and I think into the 90s when this was done. And so they'll take, like, for example, if 100 people who get married in a particular decade, how many of those marriages end in divorce by the end of the decade or as the decades go on? So if you got married in the 50s, what is your prognosis 25 years from now? If you got married in the 80s, what's your prognosis 25 years from now, and so on and so forth? So it takes into account the length of marriage. It also takes into account the age or the times when people might have had different value sets and how they approach divorce as well. So if you look at the stats, and again, there's a calculation that they have here. Again, I don't want to get into the calculation, but if you want to find this, again, Economic Research Center is where I found this. This was from 2022, and they have the calculation at the bottom. So again, the number of couples who've been married in a decade and divorced before or within X years divided by the total number of couples married in that decade. So again, if you see at the bottom, let's just say in the, here you got 100, basically 200 couples get married in the 90s. You got the first pair that got married in 1991, and then another pair of 100 got married in 1996. That's 200 marriages in total. But then over the course of time, the pair that got married in 1991, out of that, 30 of those couples divorced, and the ones that got married in 1996, 25 of those divorced. So if you add those two together, divide by 200 and multiply by 100, you get a 27.5% divorce rate for that demographic of those who married in the 90s. Again, still not at 50%, but nevertheless, though, it gives you an idea of what that may look like, again, given for a particular time period. And so some other stats that I got up. So again, we talked about this 50%, from sources I've seen, it's never been at 50%. The divorce rate has never been 50%, at least not in the United States. In reality, the 50% divorce rate was never reality. This number was based on projections from the 70s. And again, there's a reason for that. From the 70s that it would eventually get that high, but it never did. Projections held that if 2% of married couples continue to divorce each year, even over the ensuing decades, the number would reach 50% or higher. So it was based on what people were seeing in the 70s, and they thought that it would get to that rate later on as time, but it never reached a 50% divorce rate.
Right now, because I know how everybody says it's 50% rates of divorces and 50% in marriages, blah, 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 whatever. That is a bogus rumor you're telling me right now.
Well, again, it was started out as a projection. Again, I don't know who started the projection, but the numbers are never reached that height. Now, again, they're still relatively high. I mean, we're not saying that, okay, it's not 10%. I mean, it's definitely higher than that.
Well, of course.
But this is just something that's just been beat into everybody's head. You got a 50-50 chance of getting divorced. But again, there's a lot of factors involved there. When you got married, what decade that you got married in. And as I said earlier, stats are saying that divorces are actually going down over the last couple decades, not up. So, and there's going to be factors for that as well. Here's another site that I saw. This is a divorce practice. Okay, so we have a secret. You've been lied to about the divorce rate. At some point, every American has been told that the divorce rate is 50%. That's a lie. But once the number sticks in your head, it makes you hard to focus on marriage success because you're worried about not being in the half that fail. So here it says here, and this is the same thing that I quoted earlier, just from a different site. So back in the 70s, they said if people continue to get divorced at 2% each year, you would eventually see a divorce rate of 50% in coming years. So in short, they took what they believed would become a trend and never calculated the actual divorce rate. Because the rate was continually repeated over the years, it became an unquestioned fact related to marriage. If it wasn't calculated off of the actual number of marriages and divorces, instead it was a projection from the 70s, as I said earlier. So again, it just got into the populace, and people just believed it over time. So again, these are things I certainly bought into it. I never certainly heard those numbers. But,
I thought it was like it was 50% and higher, actually.
And higher, exactly. So just some more stats here. So this is what I was talking about earlier, that third way of projecting marriages. So basically, for the folks who got married in the 50s, you had a lower divorce rate over a course of a marriage. So they take like a 25-year statistical mark. So again, typically if you got married in the 50s, again, divorce was something. I know my parents got married in the 50s. Even if you weren't together, you never got divorced. My parents never divorced. And I know several of my relatives, they never got divorced. They weren't together, but they just never divorced because the D word was like, you could be estranged as much as you want, but the D word was never introduced. It was an anathema. It was just taboo. You just didn't do it. So the divorce rate is obviously going to be lower. It's under 30%. Certainly for folks in the 50s, it increased in the 60s, and it really got high in the 70s. But for those who got married in the 80s, this stat here, this chart was taken back in 2007. So again, so it doesn't have the full measure. And certainly for those who got married in the 90s, again, that chapter, so to speak, is still being written. But again, the numbers are saying that the divorce rates are going down. So for the people in the 70s, it was definitely going up. And the reasons for that, and just to kind of give you how this metric works. So let's just say if you want to calculate over a 5-year period, the rate of divorce is obviously it's going to be lower here after 5 years. But if you go out to 25 years, it's going to be a lot higher. So again, this measure of divorce takes into account the length of marriage, not just the fact that you divorced, whether you got divorced in your first year, second year, etc., taking a 25-year out. And clearly those who got married in earlier times, divorce was a no-no. It was a taboo, and it was just something that just wasn't done or talked about. Even if you were in a bad marriage, it just wasn't something that was something that was done. Some more stats here. Again, so talking about why the 70s spiked up the way it was. Okay, so again, in the 70s and 80s, the divorce rate went up as no-fault divorces became the norm in many states. However, as you learned in the last section, the divorce rate has actually declined over the last 20 years. Almost 70% of marriages entered into the 90s made it into their 15th wedding anniversary. According to the University of Michigan economist Justin Wolfers, if the trend continues in this manner, then 2/3 of couples will not get divorced. So you're talking about a 33% divorce rate if this trend continues, not the 50% that we've been given. So you're more likely to stay married than not. But I think this 50% thing has gotten to so many people's minds. It's like, well, again, it's basically flipping a coin. And so again, for those who might be thinking, well, should I get married because I got a 50-50 chance of getting a divorce? Maybe a stat like this may, help some people to say, hey, we have actually more of a chance, especially if we do things right. Now, again, nothing's foolproof. And I guess, like I said earlier, I mean, certainly at one point I did. And as you said, CQ did. I mean, at some point, it's not that the topic doesn't come up or that you don't have your rough points in the road. But the stats are saying that it's more likely that you will stay married than not, especially for those when they've been taking marital statistics since the 90s. But yeah, the 70s, when no fault became a thing and people's like, oh, I can get out of this, then yeah, they definitely peaked the divorce rates to such an extent where people were saying, well, if this continues, yeah, we are going to be in a 50-50 situation. And it says here, there are many factors that have contributed to the decline in divorces. First, the average age of the bride and groom continued to go up, which I guess is basically saying, maybe it's with the age generally comes a bit more maturity and wisdom. Here's is that college graduates tend to marry later in life and have a lower risk of divorce. Another factor is access to birth control, which means less stress from unplanned pregnancies. Another common factor that contributes to a lower divorce rate is that some people aren't getting married. The acceptance of people who live together who are not married means that fewer get married. Obviously, without marriage, there is no divorce. That's certainly not to minimize the impact of ending a relationship that involves cohabitation without marriage. So again, our guy King, this is kind of where he's, he's at, and again, I'm not saying sharing anything he doesn't share on his own platform. Go to the King and Me channel, and him and Michelle talk about these things often. But the stats, the numbers are saying divorces are going down, and you're more than likely, again, if you are more educated or more economically stable, you're probably going to be less inclined to get a divorce. So again, who is getting a divorce? Says around 39% of men with a high school education or less get divorced. This is compared to 30% to 7% of women with a high school education or less who get divorced. Less than 30% of people with a 4-year college degree will get divorced. So I guess there's something to, that educational piece that, you make maybe wiser decisions. Do that. Now, the sad part, again, for my community, and it is true, African Americans have a 40% chance of filing for divorce, and Native Americans have a 50% likelihood of divorcing. Statistics are taken from the Washington Post. So
Wow.
again, so a lot of this has to do with your economic situation, your level of education. There's a lot of factors that get into it, but this is something that then I didn't correlate. I always thought it was the other way around, that I thought more educated people got more divorce because, again, you think that you live independently. Whereas I thought poorer people kind of like, well, look, we got to live together and we got to make this work. But they're saying that, again, the less educated you are, the more likely you are to divorce. And so again, these are things that I never considered. And again, you can take these stats, you could say it's BS, you could take it for what it is. It just, when I started looking into this and I looked at several, what I liked about here is that they summarized a lot of the information that I was seeing, and they kind of put it in a format that was that I thought would be a bit more digestible for the show. Now let's just talk about now. So that's just for the U.S., but let's look at some of these global statistics, which is something we always like to do here. Obviously, we're comparing cultures here, so let's go on what's going on globally. So again, divorce statistics in 2022, only 15% of adults in the U.S. believe that a no-fault divorce is acceptable, that divorce should be committed without any serious reason. In contrast, 30% of people believe that a divorce should never be permitted, and 33% of 18 to 24-year-olds make it an age group the least likely to support divorce. There's a couple more here that I found interesting here. Argentina dropped from 103 to, these are just some searches. Oh, this is the last one at the bottom I thought was interesting. The Maldives, highest divorce rate in the world, again, based on the crude divorce metric. Again, crude divorce metric is you take the number of divorces within the current year and you divide by 1,000 people in that population. And in that situation, I think that's an Islamic country, if I'm not mistaken. And there they have laws where if a guy just wants to divorce his wife, he's like, look, I don't want it anymore. I could just divorce you just like that. So again, Maldives has the highest, amongst the highest in the world. Here's some of these stats. Again, they asked them questions, 2001 respondents. They asked 3 questions. Marriage should be forever, no matter what happens within the marriage. I don't believe divorce is acceptable. Divorce is acceptable, but only if your spouse does something wrong. In other words, adultery, abuse, lying, or crime. Divorce is acceptable if one party simply decides that they no longer wish to be married and there is no serious reason required. And then I don't believe in marriage at all. So again, the breakdown of from the survey they did, which is a big one. 2,000 you can say is a small sample size, but again, 15% of people, as said earlier, believe that you should be able to divorce just because you want to. I don't want to be anymore. Fine, you don't want to be here. Fine, let's get divorced and no problem. Some, again, the largest block saying that there needs to be a reason. I mean, there needs to be something that you can't come back from. That you don't want that, and then you have a small group here. Some people just don't believe in marriage at all. Shout out to our guy King, or again, some people have other opinions about it. But this kind of gives you just a sample of how people look at divorce. I think this is still looking at U.S. In terms of these kind of numbers. More data here. Countries that have the easiest divorce process. So again, all of these are basically no-fault divorce countries where no-fault divorce is allowed. So again, you don't want to be with somebody. Mexico surprised me a little bit because of the Catholic influence there, and same thing with Spain. But you want to get out. They got here Spain. The only requirements for divorce in Spain are to have lived in Spain for 6 months, to have been married 3 months, and to be a Spanish national. Spain operates no-fault divorce system, meaning that there are no other requirements to get a divorce. So these guys here allow you the easiest way out from a global perspective. And then those countries that are the hardest to get out of, again, some of these you kind of expect. A lot of these are, again, Muslim, Islamic countries: Pakistan, Sudan, Algeria, Egypt, and Jordan. Much harder to get out of a situation in those countries than in others. And again, a lot of this also has to do with the rights that women may have in that country. Because I know in America, they say over 70% of women file for divorce in the U.S. I don't think it's necessarily the same thing in a lot of these Islamic countries. Here it says in Algeria, for example, Algeria uses the talaq system of divorce. If women wish to divorce, they must either prove wrongdoing on the part of their husband, or they can choose to end the marriage through a full repayment of the dowry. All right. So again, those are countries where dowries are still given. Got a few more here. This one here, there are only 2 countries in the world. So this is a trivia question for you. If there's only 2 countries in the world where divorce is completely illegal, one is the Philippines and the other one is Vatican City. Both of these countries have Roman Catholic majority. Historically, Roman Catholicism has also been strictly opposed to divorce and does not acknowledge any divorce procedure other than an annulment. All right. So again, those are the only 2 where even as of today, you can't get a divorce in any of those countries. So choose wisely who you marry in those places. And then here again, countries with the highest divorce rates. Again, America's not in there. All right. So again, a lot of these countries in former Soviet Union, Georgia, Belarus, Moldova, Latvia, Dominican Republic. So again, 2.4. Again, this is the crude measure of measuring divorce statistics. 2.7 divorces per 1,000 people in a given year.
To be honest with you, Paul, with if you can go back to the other slide for one
Sure
second.
thing.
So DR, I thought that'd be a lot higher on the list, to be honest with you, because at least I know every Dominican who's been married has been divorced at least once. My ex was Dominican, and she was divorced twice. So I expect that let's be a lot higher. I'm not saying it's all Dominicans. I'm not saying that.
Sure thing.
Saying the Dominicans that I met that have been married, they're on their second marriage, they're usually divorced first.
Right.
Great example. Her brother, he's also on his 3rd marriage right now.
Yeah.
So
and one thing, in fact, you just reminded me, 'cause one thing I didn't get, but I can kind of just summarize it. The more you're married, the more likely you are to divorce. So the idea is the second marriage, the rate goes up higher that you may divorce. If you get married again the 3rd time, it gets higher still. So it's with each marriage, your likelihood of divorce actually increases. Because I guess it's like, the first one is like you got the fear of God in you. And then it's like, well, I didn't die from the first one, so I might as well get another one. But the divorce rates tend to increase the more marriages that you typically have. So you said, the guy's been married. He said he's on his 3rd marriage.
Her brother.
Yeah.
My ex's brother's on his 3rd marriage. When we were
3rd marriage, yeah.
He was just getting married again.
Yeah. So I wasn't able to. You just reminded me. I didn't capture it in the slide deck. Countries with the lowest divorce rates, again, using that crude number: India, Vietnam, Sri Lanka, Peru, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, South Africa, Malta, Guatemala, Venezuela, Ireland, and Uruguay. Lowest divorce rates. This stat comes from divorce.com. As if there is a site called.
I'm just curious. I know all these countries. When you were doing research, what was Greece on the list? I'm just curious.
I didn't find specific, but I did find this one. This is coming from Radin Solicitors. Again, this is also an attorney firm that did say here where divorces are increasing, the rates are increasing. So Greece, for example, and this is recent, March of 2025. Divorces in Greece are up 40%. Now, again, this is using the crude. More than likely, they're using the crude measure. So if you go from like a 2.1 to a 2.5, that could be like a 40% increase right there. So again, for Greece, they are going up, and maybe you can certainly speak to that. And have you seen, in your time growing up, are more people divorcing? And I know the country is an Orthodox, Greek Orthodox Church and whatnot. I mean, certainly is the church concerned about that, or how they've.
So the church is obviously it has a big factor in this, because remember, Greece is one of the most. I'm not saying the most religious country, but one of the most. is up there with, they do everything around religion, no matter what.
Mm-hmm.
So you're raised by your parents, tell you you're going to get married, you're going to have kids, you're going to have grandkids. The church tells you the same thing, and like it tells you, because it tells me all the time. Well, Peter, you also need confess when you're doing adultery. I'm not talking to you about this.
Right.
But it is driven in our heads to get married and stay married.
Mm-hmm.
So from people that I know who are Greek, in the American side, Greek Americans and Greeks, I only knew one person, maybe two tops, that were divorced.
Mm-hmm.
When I lived in Greece,
Right.
the numbers are very low. Yeah, they argued. They're butt heads or stuff like that, but nothing serious like, oh, they're going to get a divorce.
Right. Right. But I wonder what it'd be like now if you went back to just Greece today, 2025. Like, are people's sensibilities, or is a lot of that pressure to stay married? Because again, and we're not saying here, just because you're married, that says these days, it says nothing about the state of your relationship. You know what I mean? It just decides that you just decide to stay together. Are you happily married or not? What is your level of marital satisfaction? Those are totally different metrics and questions that people need to, certainly ask themselves. But, certainly for a lot of people, especially in these countries that allow no fault divorce, if you're not happy or if you don't think this situation is worth sticking with, you don't have to stay. And you can certainly file for divorce. So again, if Greece has adopted no fault divorce, then certainly that could explain, because we already saw earlier, Spain certainly allows for no fault divorce, and their divorce rates have also spiked as well as a result. So as countries who've adopted this, certainly they've been seeing these spikes in it. But contrastly, though, there are countries where the divorce rate is decreasing. So as we said earlier about the United States, the divorce rates have been coming down over the last couple decades now. So again, it's not always the case that, the perception is that it's 50% and climbing. Again, it seems like the data and statistics don't necessarily support that. Here again, divorce rates by country, again, using the crude measures. Not a lot of data on Africa. This might be where, David might be, or Ekene might be useful in this. There's not a lot of, I don't know if people have actually gone into Africa and taken metrics on the divorce process, or, how people go about it there. A lot of the data in Africa seems to be in the Arab states or in South Africa, which is, certainly a mixed population. But it seems like the highest rates, certainly in Russia and the former Soviet Union. Even China has a pretty high divorce rate relative to the population. The U.S., again, 2.7 per 1,000. Canada's a little bit lower. But again, you saw here Dominican Republic 2.9. So they're the highest in North America and South America on the left side of the hemisphere. Certainly DR. So I don't know what's going on. I don't know what's going on in DR compared to other nation states in the Caribbean and what's happening in Mexico. But DR, it's a different ball game there for some reason. And as you said earlier, people personally who've gone through divorces in there. But if you look at, again, that former Soviet bloc or whatnot, divorce seems like it's pretty simple in those areas. So I just wanted to kind of set that up. And again, I know I shared a ton of data and whatnot, but it definitely seems like that, again, what we've been told, it hasn't necessarily been true. Again, picking any metric that you want to use to measure the divorce statistics. But again, divorce is certainly a reality that every one of us has been touched by, whether it be us personally, if you've gone through it yourself, or family members or friends who've gone through it. So again, it's sort of touched a lot of us in different ways. And as I've said before, just because you are married, what is the state of quality of your relationship? Because back in the day, the taboo was such where it didn't matter what the status of the relationship was. You didn't leave your husband, you didn't leave your spouse. Now people are saying, well, certainly there are conditions that warrant a separation, even if you're a staunch Bible person. Bible talks about, you only divorce over, infidelity or abandonment or things of that nature. But people are having that option. So let's talk about that a little bit. First of all, I want to thank everybody for being certainly in the channel. So again, Mariana, Coach Ferg is certainly in the building. I appreciate him and certainly his commentary. Yes, divorce rates are down. But again, we also saw those metrics that, again, the more educated you are, seems to lessen your chances of divorce more so than increase it. And, you also got time in the building, Tom from Cleveland. Let me know if what happens with Shador, if he makes the roster. Look forward to seeing you on Sunday. On Wednesday for the One-on-Ones sports show. This is not the 1670s. Women can roll around in the world and scam men into marrying them for money. Travis Hunter is a perfect example. It says women are incentivized to divorce their husbands when they're not happy. Congratulations to Tom Brady. He put everything into his mother's name. These women, I'm looking up close. Here you got Will Smith and Barack Obama. So we are starting to learn that Michelle, that's not really love. Barack finds ways to make him look bad as a black man. Dwayne Wade has pocketbook and nail polish on the line. So, and the last comment here today, marriage is about ego, individuality, and feelings. If you're not making me happy, I'm getting divorced. Yeah, and certainly the laws in this country certainly facilitate that that ability that you can essentially leave on demand. And I don't see, is there any push or aim, whether it be legislatively or legally, to reverse that trend? People are going to have that option. But let's look into, again, because, again, you can have all the laws that you want to. Ultimately, it's about the decisions that you make before you get married, when you're in the marriage, and as you go on in your marriage, you have to make decisions all the time to decide whether you're going to stay married or not, and not just stay married, but are you going to be doing the work to stay married, and to have a certain level of satisfaction where you find it better to be together than apart. So let's chop this up a little bit.
If you saw his first comment is divorce are done due to less people getting married, and that's true. I know, like my cousin, for example. I know we're not speaking terms, but from what I've heard in the grapevine, and he has told me too multiple times, he doesn't care about getting married. He doesn't give a shit about married. He only cares about having kids and his woman living on his roof. So that's the same thing as marriage in a way. If you really think about it, he doesn't need to care about the paperwork. Mm-hmm. And the other comment he makes seems like, with the welfare and low income, and that's another good point there too. There is so many different ways you can look at this. Mm-hmm. Because not everybody's making what I do or you do or so on. Mm-hmm. Some people are struggling to just make ends meet sometimes. Mm-hmm. And they need assistance, and that's where the assistance can run, Section 9 and all that stuff. Right. So sometimes they have to stay separated or divorced to have a roof over their heads.
Well, yeah, poverty is a factor, no question. Now, you can go back to the welfare system when it really caught on a play that basically push men essentially out of the home. It's like, look, you can either take the money or you can take the man. And for a lot of women, they took the man. They took they took the money, no question. Having unplanned children, I talk about this all the time. Now, for women, they say marry before you carry, but for guys, I say, look, I this is just an advice of a bald-headed guy. But I say, look, if she can't be your wife, she should not be the mother of your children. But so many guys put the cart before the horse. I would prefer that there's a trial period, if you will. Be married and not live together. Because again, and guys will roast me on this. They may disagree with me on it. I don't think cohabitation is the same thing as marriage. Just my personal opinion. I just don't. So being with someone for 3 years, living with someone for 3 years, being married for 3 years, especially if you marry young enough to where she's still going to be in childbearing years, is a good for me is a good sage thing to do. Make sure you can live with this woman before you decide to have babies with her. But, sometimes, again, there's a lot of people who, if truth be told, are not cut out to be parents. They don't want to be parents, but they felt thrusted in. Well, this is your father now, your mom. This is what you got to do. And they never had the relationship right, but they just got thrust together because, okay, well, we got a kid now. And that doesn't necessarily lead to marital success either. So again, poverty or lack of income, having kids too early, those are going to be major drivers. And again, those stats that was early, the highest rates of divorce happen to be in those who have a high school education or lower, or in the poverty line, the Native American population, the African American population. Again, if you look at incomes by ethnic group, Native Americans, African Americans are at the bottom of the totem pole. So I think those are things that, again, if this is something that you are still considering to get into, those are things that you probably need to work on. Get yourself together, get your career, get things, going, or at least going in the positive direction. And if you want to latch on with somebody who's going to build with you, then great. But don't go rushing into something that you're not necessarily ready for. Now, again, unless you want to go back to the old ways where marriages were supported by the greater family. So in other words, you can marry young. I mean, I see it with Latinos now. You could be 16, 17, 18 years old, still have your man in tow because the whole family kind of comes in. Every time you go to the mall, there's the kids, there's the young mother, there's the 40-something grandma and the 60-year-old great grandma, and they just keep it together. So it seems like they have an infrastructure in place that supports these families, because the reality is, especially with the Mexican Americans, Latin Americans in general, but Mexican Americans in general, they have the youngest race when it comes to women having children. I think in that community, it's the lowest, lower than African Americans, but they still have that sense of community that kind of bonds them together. So I think if you're trying to do all those things, then I think that would certainly mitigate some of it. But still, you got to get to the fact that, again, unfortunately, not everyone's gonna make it. And divorce, again, is a reality that for a lot of people, and I saw a lot of it during COVID. I saw a lot of, a handful of couples that I know that we didn't keep in contact with because of the shutdown and everything. When we got back together with them, they didn't make it. And so what's that?
I believe it, because COVID was, like they say, it broke a lot of couples because they were not used to being locked in the house for so many hours and so many days, because most of them are like, go do their own thing. Like you and your wife, for a great example, you go to work, she goes to work. You have the separation period. Mm-hmm. Have you ever, except COVID, have you ever been in a room locked in more than 24 hours?
What, you're asking me if have I?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Reality, that's not for everybody either. Remember that. If you argue, you can walk away, but when you're locked in the house, you can't walk away. Mm-hmm. During COVID. You see where I'm going with this?
Yeah, but that to me, that gets to I guess the T, if you will. Again, what is the state of your I mean, sometimes, with your work career and whatnot, think about it. For most people, you're away from home more hours than you are together.
There you go.
You know what I mean? And so you can almost look at your work or your career as sort of an escape from everything else. And look, I've seen it a lot where, your quote unquote work husband or your work spouse, you spend more time with them. You spend more time chopping it up with them, telling all your business. I've seen that up close. Than things that they shouldn't necessarily know about that you won't even share with your husband or your spouse. I've seen that as well. But when that's the only person you got to interact with, and just the stresses of just because again, a lot of people lost jobs during COVID. I don't want to discount that either. A lot of people lost jobs, or wages reduced, or you lost loved ones. So all of those things can certainly put a strain on a marriage, and that could have just been the breaking point. You might have been stressed as it was, but you were managing it, and sometimes the pandemic might have just taken you over the edge. But I mean, that is something that that is something that we have to recognize. But let's talk a little bit more personal, because I know I said your parents now. And I'm sure you told me, and I forgot if I didn't ask. Your parents actually divorced, or they were just separated?
They were just separated. So years and years before their separation, they were always arguing, saying I'm going to divorce each other, but they never did. There was just how they blew steam off. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So when it came down to the final nail in the coffin, they called it quits. They never got the divorce. They were always saying they were going to.
Yeah.
But money came involved, other things came involved. They're not officially divorced, but they're been separated for years and years and years.
Yeah, like I said, same with mine. I mean, I grew up, my parents basically split. I said they never divorced, but they basically, by the time I was born, they were basically split. Mm-hmm. They tried a couple, reconciles or whatever, but that didn't work with me. My mom with her mental issues, and then my dad with his drinking and whatnot. So there was just a lot of things where it was like oil and water at that point. It just wasn't going to mix. Now, I know my dad still loved her a lot. I mean, they say the people who tell you the truth is old people, people who drink a lot, and kids. And he certainly did a lot of that. So I knew the love was there. But again, as I said earlier, even that's not enough. So we talked about, again, communication. Communication isn't enough. Even love, or how you feel about the person, isn't enough. At the end of the day, were they willing to address the issues that were putting the wedge in the relationship to begin with? And it just, that wasn't going to be there. My dad wasn't going to say, okay, all right, I want my wife back, so I'm going to stop drinking. He wasn't going to do that. And my mom, she was in denial pretty much her whole life that there was nothing wrong with her. And that's the worst person in the world to deal with, when you have somebody who doesn't realize that they have a problem, and they actually do, and trying to get them into counseling or treatment or whatever. That's tough. So it just wasn't going to work for them because of those differences. But there were times in my life I could say, yeah, the love was definitely there, but their issues were such where it just wasn't going to happen. And then I got a couple siblings who was remarried, but certainly divorced. So I didn't grow up in a healthy environment where I saw a lot of good marriages. A lot of my aunts and uncles, they were divorced, or if they were together, you could just see the drama, fighting physically sometimes. I mean, I just saw a lot of things that were yeah. I had an uncle who basically whipped his wife like with a belt. I mean, just like my mom and I, again, we were nomads at the time. We were going from place to place. We stayed in their trailer, and a guy, he took a belt to his wife. She was a piece of work too. But he's out out of the trailer, and I'm looking through the window, and he's just like a child, just beating with a belt. I mean, I've seen some stuff, man. I mean, so yeah. So when you talk about, I didn't have any role models until I was an adult, and even then, I had to look outside the culture. I said Asian Indians is a major reason. And again, I realized that those relationships aren't perfect, but if you saw in the stat, they have amongst the lowest divorce rates in the world. Now, again, that's also rising, especially in the more developed and the more metropolitan urban areas or whatnot. Divorce is becoming a thing, but certainly back in the day, in the 80s and the 90s, that was just something you didn't do. Mm-hmm. but they showed me a way of how marriage worked that I just had no conception of. This idea of arranged marriages and stuff. I had no idea that those things even existed anymore. And just being around them and seeing how stuff worked or whatnot, and what the thought process was. Yeah, you're not gonna. I mean, look, you may find each other attractive at first, but you can't be saying I'm in love with that person. But you get married, and you sort of love comes later. And that was like a major influence on me on marriage. And then I got around some Christian people who talked about marriage and what a husband's role is supposed to be and what a wife's responsibility is supposed to be and how they flowed. And for the most part, they had some positive influence and whatnot. So I was like, okay, well, maybe I can do this. But I was like saying in my early 20s, I didn't want to get married because, again, I had no record or nobody to say, yep, I want to be like that. My parents, aunts, uncles, I had no siblings. I had nobody who was going to give me any kind of positive reinforcement that this is something worth doing. So I was like, nah, I'm probably not going to do that. So again, I'm not, I didn't go into this thing blindly, or I didn't go into this thing, naive about what the realities of, divorce is, because I've seen it up close. I've seen it personally, sometimes painfully, and it wasn't a good thing for me. And again, I know you had to obviously deal a lot with your parents splitting up and whatnot. Talk about what impact that have on you, if any, and on your dating, or do you think it may have had an impact on just your relationships, just overall, just seeing. So first question is, again, how did it affect you kind of growing up? And do you think it might have had an impact on how you went about dating or approaching the opposite sex?
When I was younger, it didn't impact me that much because they were still together. They were, they might, because my dad stayed in New York mostly because the commute was too far for him. Because when we lived in Long Island, he didn't want to do the 45-minute commute. It was just easier to just rent a room and just go right to work. Didn't process it as I got older, and as I got older, we moved up to PA, so that made more sense. Have a room in New York and not commute 2 hours every day. Mm-hmm. 2 hours one way, 2 hours, that's 4 hours to commute. So it didn't really affect me as much, believe it or not. When it did affect me, when my dad sat down and told me, like, yo, yeah, I cheated on your mom, dude, because your mom she wasn't putting out, so I had to get it from somewhere else. Mm-hmm. That affected me more than anything. And so I question, does this marriage thing even work? Is it bogus? Or should it be one of those guys who just goes from woman to woman and sleeps from one woman to the next woman, or even have 3 women's, and I went on a dark spiral at one point, and like I had a different woman every single day in my bed, and I didn't even care about memorizing the names. I named them Monday, your Tuesday, your Thursday, your Friday. That's how bad it was.
Wow.
And one of them turned around. She goes to me, "Do you even know my name?" And go, "Nope, you're Friday." Wow. I got fucking slapped over the head with that one. She got up and dressed and got left. I'm like,
wow.
And that's how bad it got, because I was in a dark spiral, like I said, after my dad told me that. Mm-hmm. Because I didn't think marriage was a thing. Even relationship, I didn't believe them at that point. Mm-hmm. Then my, I start coming around talking to people, CQ and some other people. I'm like, yo, it could work if you put some time in it. All right. Then my ex came in. I'm like, oh, great, this is gonna work great. But then they get separated. I'm questioning a lot of things I'm doing in my own relationship. Like, I did not want to turn into them. Mm-hmm. I did not want to go into what they have.
Right.
And that's another reason why I haven't got married at 40 years old almost. There's nothing wrong with that. Yeah, I know a lot of men who have not been married or have kids at 40.
Sure.
But I did that intentionally in a way, because I didn't want to be married, divorced with a kid, and dealing with child support and all that bullshit. I didn't want to deal with it.
Yeah.
If I'm going to get married, I'm getting married the right way, have it in my life, and call it a day. That's it. I'm not the type of man who goes for woman and woman and woman.
It's just time. You may not. Alexander O'Neal. Yes, this was a song back in the day. It's in my playlist. But no, he wasn't. I don't think he was talking about Saturday Night Love. I'm just saying he had a woman for every day of the week. But no, he's not just going here time. Good call out. Nice retrospective there. So when did it change? So was it in you talking with CQ that you started to change a little bit to saying like, yeah, maybe this is something I can do, or was it other things? I know you weren't necessarily that religious at the time. I mean, at least not going to church and whatnot. But in recent years, you had a lot of life.
I wasn't going to church. That's the only difference.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes sense.
All right, break that down then.
I was busy. I was working weekends and all that stuff. So me to go to church wasn't like, oh, I have time to go to church. I know it wasn't an excuse, but I used that as an excuse because as a kid, I was forced to go to church every single Sunday. Didn't matter if it was in Greece or the States. I used to go the altar boy, had to go sick, non-sick. It didn't matter. If it's church, you're going no matter what. And that's what it was. So when I got older, like I kind of like I called it my break. I took a little break. Hey, King, what's going on? We took a break from going to church, and then when me turning around from going to sleeping with all these women and just being like, hey, marriage is a real thing. It was a combination of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Talking to people, seeing people's marriages, and I'm like, this actually does work if you put time and effort in it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. King's favorite topic, by the way.
Shout out to King Smith. Certainly go check out his channel, The King and Me. Again, they talk a lot, so about relationship issues and certainly their own dating history, and they kind of bring you into the world that they are fashioning for themselves. Neither one of them, and again, I'm not sharing anything that you can't watch on their own channel. At this point, marriage is not necessarily on the table. I'll just say that at least for now. But essentially, one thing that he did say on his last show I listened to, and it kind of I even asked him the question kind of later on. It's almost like people are kind of given two choices these days, right? It's like you either be in an unhappy marriage, or you're in a relationship without marriage. It's almost like a dichotomy, or neither option is necessarily optimal. And I was just asking, it was like, why has it come down to these sort of binary choices? And I just said that, basically in my situation, like I said, I didn't come from a background of seeing successful marriages. My whole family, you can look at the history of it. I got another sister's been married more than one. Now she's been married to her husband. She's been married to him for 30 years. They just had their 30th wedding anniversary recently. But growing up, I didn't see a lot to say, well, is this even worth it? But got around some peoples and some influences, and I just decided, let's break the cycle. And again, as I said earlier, just because I can honestly say I'm in a happy marriage does not mean that divorce wasn't at least thought about, or quitting wasn't at least thought about. Mm-hmm. So I just want to keep it 100. Now I'm not gonna go up here. Yeah, I'm in my 29th season of marriage, but every day's been great. It's like, no, every day hasn't been great, and we still have. Like I said, I had an argument with her last night. So I mean, it's so again, you have those moments, and I don't want to put people on and saying, oh yeah, it's the greatest, God bless you, that is the greatest thing. No, you have to work on it all the time. That's one of the reasons why I call my match what I call it. This is marriage season number 29. The other 28 seasons really don't matter too much. The only thing that matters is the season that I'm in. So it's just like a football team. So again, we're about to go into the NFL season. It doesn't matter if the Philadelphia Eagles won the Super Bowl last year. It's all about what are you going to do this year. There's a lot of turnover. Guys want their money. Guys left. It's a new team from last year. What are you going to do this year? So again, my approach though is, let's see if we could just sort of break some of the cycles. And again, for you guys who came in late, again, shared some stats earlier. Go back and see the replay of the show. Unfortunately, African Americans and the highest divorce rate in amongst all American people is unfortunately the Native Americans. It's over 50% who file for divorce in the Native American communities. But again, we all know in those communities there's a lot of trauma there. And so, those are things that I just said, hey, let's do something different. And I guess there's been more days when I thought about that, about doing something different than just mailing it in just because my needs weren't getting met, or to be honest, my sexual needs weren't getting met. That's what it boiled down to. I had 3 kids in 4 years, and my wife just wasn't down. So again, those are things we had to, again, grow up. We had to kind of get through. And we're still working on it. It's still something that, because like I said, the argument yesterday was after 29 years together, we still doing this. Yeah, so we got to do it again. There's certain things we haven't quite perfected yet that we're still working on.
But again, Paul, no marriage is perfect either. Let's be straight.
Correct. Yeah, and that's the point. That's what I'm getting to.
Yeah, like in a relationship, it doesn't have to be marriage. A relationship, no relationship is perfect. I bet you if anybody who's in a relationship right now is up here with us would agree they have issues. And that is a part of being in a relationship or a marriage. You're going to butt heads. They're not if or when, is how bad.
Appreciate that, Tom. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's something, again, you have to appreciate you also, and certainly what you're doing as well. Yeah. So I guess I tend to but I'm glad that you shared because that's what I want to kind of get, because that's the one thing sometimes we don't think about a lot of times, right? The impact on the family, right? And another thing too, I mean, marriages is a communal act. I know these days people want to look at marriage as just about the man and the woman and that's it, and who cares about anything else. But marriage has always been a social contract, always, right? I mean, marriage has brought community kingdoms together, right? If you wanted to have a lasting peace with with an adversary, even if you conquer them, it's like, look, we're gonna be in alliance. How we gonna make this alliance permanent? Oh, you get your daughter, and I'll get my son, and we gonna marry them together, and we gonna be one after that. And the kids that are birthed after that, that's gonna represent this deal. So there's always been an aspect where marriage was more about the community, more so than the individuals. I think it's probably in the last couple hundred years where the sort of the sense of romance and romantic ties, and I have to love this and the stars have to align and things like that. I think that's more of a modern convention, more so than not. But I mean, back in the day, you had betrothals, like you were born and you all knew you were gonna marry when you were born. So again, what did love have to do with that? Mm-hmm. So I think this age we're in is such where I think the fact that people are looking at marriage as just an act between two people and not necessarily looking at the ripple effect that it has, certainly on kids and what their potential outcomes are going to be, and just the larger community. Divorce hurt. When I found out about my friends, like, I hurt. I can't explain it. Like, when because one in particular, like my wife called and said that one of our friends, who again didn't know that they weren't even together, she called and said she needed help at Costco because she needed help getting something into the van. I just left Costco, so I was a little annoyed because I was like, oh man, you could have called me a few minutes ago. Now I got to turn around and come back and all that, so I was kind of annoyed at that. And the whole time I was coming back, I was saying, well, where's her husband? I'm not going to say his name, but why is it he should be doing this? And then I get there and I basically help her get the item that she bought, a piece of furniture, got it to the house. I know where they lived. And I'm just naive as a whatever. I was like, hey, so how's what's his name? and we're not together. Like, it hurt because again, our kids like grew up together. Like our kids like in the choir and the dance team together. I mean, we were like,
if you remember a while back, I did a show saying, should marriage have an expiration date? If you have to renew your marriage, like a marriage license, renew that like a license. And if you remember on that show, we were split down the middle. 50% said yes, 50% no. And that goes back to that show too. And like, think about it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, maybe we should have to renew our license again. It might prevent all of these problems. Saying, listen, let's sit down and have a renegotiation to our contract. Mm-hmm. This is where I'm at. This is where you're at.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's a bad idea.
It's not too far off from what I was saying. Yeah. So she wanted me to do the husband duties. Again, I didn't know she didn't have a husband. So that's the thing. I went in totally thinking, well, her husband must have been detained somewhere or he was doing something else. Again, these are family friends of ours. So it wasn't like I was just, I wasn't volunteering for it. I just didn't know until literally I'm putting the furniture in her garage. And then I'm like, I just naively asked the question. And again, that happened a few times. I would just ask the question, so how's Frank doing? Oh, we're not together anymore. It's like my heart just dropped. You know what I mean? He's like,
that probably dropped to the floor.
I'm like, what you talking about, Willis? I mean, it was so like I just could not believe it. You know what I mean? So yeah. So the idea of that happening for people who we've known and we've gone through things. We would be in marriage ministry together. Like, they have couples retreats and they would have different things. We'd all be there, and, again, you lost touch for a minute. You find out they're not there. You got 15 years in, you got 20 years in, 20 years plus in. So that's why, like I said, I always have this sort of one season approach when it comes to marriage. But I want to get back to what you were saying earlier about this idea of, sort of having like a trial or re-up or what have you. That's one of the reasons I said that I think it's wise not to have children right away when you get married, especially if you get married relatively quickly. Like I got married from the first date to marriage was 10 months. I proposed to her after, our first date was in May. I proposed in October. In fact, it was the day before my birthday. And so 6 months I proposed, and we were married 4 months later. So I think in that situation, I think it's wise if you marry someone right away, don't be in such a hurry to have kids. And I think there should be, just from a legal perspective, I think there should be almost a trial period. But like I said, I just don't buy the cohabitation thing as the same thing. So again, have that period. And if you want to re-up, if I could just do it, have like a magic wand and say, okay, this is how we're going to do it. All right, so you guys been together 3-year period. You still like each other, right? You're still in for this. Okay, now if you re-up, well, then it's legit. Then all the legal stuff that guys lament about or whatever, all that stuff is like, look, it's going to be real now. You had a shot to get out, but if you decide to re-up, then whatever goes down in this time, it goes down. And if you want to do it, I don't know, just like renewing a license or like a passport, you got to renew a passport every 10 years. Have a 10-year period. You come in and you reevaluate. We're going to reevaluate this again. The longer you're married, though, the more assets, if you will, are up for debate. The longer you're in. But if you want to get out after a certain time, look, I wouldn't have an issue with that. But all I'm saying is, to put on so many responsibilities so fast. Again, having the kid before the marriage, or having the kid at the wedding, the baby bump in the bridal gown, or within the first year or so, you're already pregnant already. Slow it down. Unless you're unless you're older, right? If you're like 35 plus, and then, we understand women, they have a clock and certain things like that or whatever. But if you're in your 20s still, there's no need to like rush into that. But when it does happen, and there's kids involved and whatnot, there's reverberation. Things that you might, again, and everybody handles it different. You handle it in a certain way where you became, let's just say, very promiscuous. You just didn't want the attachment. It was all about the physical with you when it came to sex. You just totally didn't want to get attached to anybody. You know what I mean? So for me, it was something where, I was kind of in a similar way. I wasn't promiscuous like that, but certainly, like I said, it just wasn't an option that I think would work for me just based on my family history. But, when it did, it certainly, it certainly changed my life in so many positive ways. So I'm definitely pro-marriage. But I'm not going to dissuade anybody that it doesn't get difficult sometimes. And there are thoughts that may come up in your head that you're going to have to deal with. Now, the only thing I won't say, the one thing that I refuse to say when it comes to marriage is, when people say marriage is hard work, I hate when people say that. When you talk about hard work, when you think about hard work, I think about the work you do. That's hard work, right? Oil drillers or digging mines is hard work. Working on skyscrapers is hard work. Ultimately, at the end of the day, the marriage is about decisions that you make. And decisions are typically made in an instant. The problem is it takes you years and years to get to that decision. As I said earlier, my wife and I would go through periods of 2, sometimes 3 weeks without speaking. But once we decided that we were in a place to speak, it was resolved like within 24 hours. It was over. Now, the idea is to settle it within, in this case from last night, it was like less than an hour. You know what I mean? Because again, we had it out and whatnot. And I was like, look, I told her, it's like, I'm too old for this. Holding stuff in, holding grudges, silent treatment. I'm too old for this now. So I'm just going to let you exactly know how I felt and explain the situation. Now, again, we may still come to a disagreement about, how things were interpreted or whatever, but I'm not sitting on this. So say, if we're going to have it out, let's have it out. Let's flush it and let's get on with things. But those are decisions. And when I was younger, it would take me longer to kind of get to these decisions. And it was stubbornness that kept a lot of things brewing when they didn't have to. Mm-hmm. So again, marriage, the decisions that you make, those happen in an instant. Getting there, I think that's up to you. And so I don't consider that work. King flew in refueling airplanes. Yeah, that sounds a little daunting to me. You know what I mean? Soldiers or whatever. I mean, to me that's hard work. Physically demanding labor, mental, labor, but again, just because you just don't want to budge off your square. That's a decision. If you want to step off the square, you step off the square. In hopefully to have a better outcome or be in a better position, just like on a chessboard. But I see no benefit in not moving. So that at least that's kind of what I've come to certainly over the years. But again, for folks in the chat, and again, appreciate Edaman Williams. Always a pleasure, brother, to see you. Haven't seen you in a minute, but it's always good that you're here. Braxton, the Snake Fiend, in the building tonight as well. Certainly great to have you here as well. But for you guys, if either you've experienced it or you've been affected by it, specifically for those who've been affected by it, your parents divorced or someone very close to you, or maybe there was somebody who you looked up to as like, yeah, like them. That's how you're supposed to do it. And then you find out later on, it's like, man, they're split. And then what does that do to your, your thoughts on marriage? Man, I don't know if I should do this now, because if they didn't make it to the finish line, then what chance do I have of making it to the finish line? And that's ultimately what everybody wants. Till death do us part is ultimately what I think, certainly what people want to get to the end of life together. And I know, a shout out to our guy LT, who really made it sacrosanct for me. It's like, what is the goal of marriage? Is death. Now, it doesn't matter. That death can happen in the first year. I mean, people lose for tragic reasons or whatever. You may lose your spouse in the first year, or you may lose them in the 50th year. But as until death, that's a successful marriage to me, regardless of how long it was. But a tragedy is like the other way around. I think it was like Judge Justice Mathis or something like that. And I don't know if she went through with it, but they were married for like 37 years. And then she's like, she wants a divorce. That rubs my sense. I don't understand that. What do you think that's going to be better out there? You have all that time in, but at the same time, it just proves to me once again, the length of your marriage really doesn't matter. If I got divorced, God forbid, next year, I would consider my marriage a failure. Now, again, a lot of people wouldn't think of it that way. But if the goal of marriage is death, then we're still in progress. That's why it's still season 29. And if, God forbid, one thing happens to us before we get to end of season 29, my marriage is a success. If we break it off, it's not a success. And so that's just the seriousness with which we're treating this thing. And yes, that we're going to have our fights and we're going to have our disagreements, but it's still a battle. And you got to be playing all the time if you want to if you want to get there. But your thoughts on that, Pete? I know I've been long stroking for a minute, but I want to get you in here.
I think you're right. Every shape, way, or form. If you put the time you need to put, there's no reason your marriage should not work. I always say you got to put work in it, and I've been wrong tonight. So you're right. Is not putting work into it is something you just need to remove it correctly, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Because it is a project. A lifetime project, because I know how people always say you always have to put your kids first before you put your anybody else front, and I think that's kind of wrong in a way.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah, because when your kids are like yourself, you're almost free nesters. What are you going to do after? Your wife is the only person that is going to have your back. Correct?
Yeah.
In theory, that is, of course.
Nah, it's look, I told my kids a long time ago when they were, kids.
Mm-hmm.
I love my wife more than you. I love your mother more than you. It's like, she's number one. So that was something that was early on. And so they know. I mean, we're like so my kids know not to play both sides of how kids are trying to play the parents against each other. It's like, nah, we're like the Berlin Wall. Because again, if it's between you and your mother, I'm picking your mother, and they know that. So they're disgusted with us, but it is what it is. Because again, at the same time, we give them a certain level of safety and security that that they actually appreciate, but they say, you guys are disgusting. We can't stand being around you guys. You guys are just
but that's
whatever.
A good thing.
Oh yeah,
because I know when I was in my last relationship and she had 3 kids, anytime I kissed her or hold her hands or hugged her or she said, I'm like, ew. I'm like, listen, My dad never did that. Like, I don't care fuck about your dad. Your dad don't live here. You don't fucking like it. The door's right there. Don't let it hit your ass. And she get mad at me like, well, don't say that. I'm like, yeah, well, I'm gonna be affected. And like, and then, you know, that's the thing. You still show affection to your wife to show that's a way for her to know, hey, I actually still care and love you and whatever. So that is a very serious thing. So when you saying you put your kids first, you don't really. You put your, it could be if you're together, of course. You put your wife or husband first because they're the one who's gonna have your hand when you're going to the ER or you're in a hospital or you're sick or you're struggling financially or whatever the case is. Mm-hmm. She's the one who's your backbone, not your kids.
Yeah. Well, and plus also it's put it this way, it's going to make her job as being a mother that much easier. If I understand her needs are being taken care of. Like I said, where we had static, it really was, again, I was putting my needs over hers. She had 3 babies, and she was stressed out. And I didn't fully comprehend or understand. My thing was like, you know, it's not like you work. Again, this is the barbaric way I was thinking. It's not like you're working, right? I can say if you had a job and you had to take care of 3 kids all the time, yeah, I can see that. But you're home. And for the first 6 years, she was home with the kids. But I didn't get that, again, she had needs. She wanted adult conversation, for example. Her day was watching Barney and Elmo and whatever else that was on, SpongeBob or whatever it was. And it was just like, you know, there was some needs there that I was neglecting. So again, that is the that's the part when I say, you know, yeah, she comes first, because if I put her first, then I already know the kids are going to be taken care of. But if I keep putting her not first, then again, what bearing then is that going to have on my kids?
Good point.
So again, there's some strategy to this as well. You put your spouses first so they can be there to keep doing what they need to do. So it's all going to serve the kids at the end of the day. But if you put all your love and your doting into your kids and you neglect your marriage, then again, when that falters, then again, it's going to leave the kids unprotected. It's like only so much you can protect the weak. You also have to protect the strong, so the strong people can keep doing the things that keep you safe. Financially, economically, emotionally, all those other things. Those have to be there. So the husband and the wife need to be first. And it doesn't mean that your kids' needs get neglected. But if it's a choice between my kids' wants and my wife's needs, I'm taking my wife's needs. Now, if my kid has a need and my wife has a need, then that's where wisdom comes in. Because sometimes there isn't necessarily an answer that everyone's going to be happy with, but there's got to be a happy compromise somewhere. But that's part of the calculus. That's the thing that, again, I've gotten better at. I think both of us gotten better at over the years, and that we both understand each other a lot better about what each person needs. Mm-hmm. And like I said earlier, once that's been communicated, now it's about, okay, let's go. Let's do this. Let's do whatever we got to do. We got to strike a deal. We got to strike a compromise with that we can work with. Again, both parties should feel like we getting something, and let's go. So yeah, so I appreciate that. And Wife School, shout out to Wife School Podcast for being in the building. The judge was taking her for granted, so it'll put it on her to be fair. Okay, let's say if I give you that. But again, 37 years. I mean, you know, that still baffles me. They're not struggling for money. So again, so what is it? What, you know, and again, there's always two sides, right? His side, her side, and then what the truth is. But to me, that's a tragedy. And I don't know if they went through with it yet. I don't know if it's official, if they're still working it out or whatever. To me, that's tragic. When something's been going for so long and then suddenly and then ends. If it was the first years, like I said, like Pete was saying earlier, yeah, you want to have a 1-2 year trial period, 3 year trial period. Don't work, boom, go your separate ways, no problem. But you got so much legacy there that again, y'all still can't work it out. So that's the thing, and that's what keeps me constantly working to again resolve conflict. Because the way I'm looking at it now, wife school, I got too much invested. I'm not throwing away 28 years. And so this year is the only thing that matters. And if there is strife, if there's conflict, I don't have days to waste. I don't have weeks to waste in some nonsense or I'm not talking to you. No, let's talk. Let's get this out. Let me see your side and decide, okay, I can see how that is. And yeah, so it said that's what he said. Okay, same on him. Then if that's on him, then again, that is something that you need to work on. So take a season 37 or 38 approach and fix what needs to be fixed.
If the man didn't take her for granted, and it kind of like oh, this is your job kind of thing. And I know Paul well enough, and like I'll use Paul as my guinea pig right now, my example. If Paul ever went up to his wife, says like, "That's your job. You need to do that. That's not my responsibility," and she's probably going to he's going to probably get slapped, or B, they're going to have a long conversation, and that is where I think a part of a marriage does fall apart when you expect things when you're not supposed to expect things. So how about you just ask, hey, babe, you know what? Can you take the mail today to the post office? You mail this out for me? You're asking now. You're not demanding. When you start demanding things, like my father demanded a lot of shit from my mother. And I remember the first time I was like, probably my teens. I literally picked up my own plate. My mom goes, what are you doing? I'm like, picking my plate up? Like, you don't do that. I'm like, no. He doesn't do that. I do that. My father had a habit of doing this, pushing his plate when he was done. And that used to piss me the fuck off.
Mm-hmm.
When he was done, he would just push it off, push his chair back, cross his legs, and sit there and wait to somebody pick this plate up and clear off. Mm-hmm. Because he expected. He never asked her to do that. He never picked up plates. Now you're demanding things. Mm-hmm. You're expecting things. Mm-hmm. And that was wrong.
Well,
Go ahead.
I'll put a caveat on that. Like I said, everything is about negotiation and expectation. If that is something that is done, for example, in Greek culture,
it's not.
If that's okay, I'm just saying that's a case.
Go ahead.
If it's something that expected, I know in Latin communities, like for example, the young girls serve the older brothers and stuff like that. Like this isn't just something you do for your husband. This is what you do for men in general. As long as that is communicated and that is the expectation, I don't necessarily have a problem with that. So you talk about roles. Yes, there are roles that I have that are mine. There are roles that my wife has that are hers. That we don't talk about much, or like I said, a lot of times if we've had a dispute about something, it's because it got off kilter that, again, people not knowing their roles. Now, again, if we need to talk about a role change or this has to be, let's have a conversation. But my wife doesn't come up to me and says, have you paid the mortgage this month? It's not even, it's not even a discussion. Because, again, I have those things. My wife doesn't mow the lawn, for example. I mean, she can look at the lawnmower. It's like, there's no expectation for her to do that. Now, again, if I was injured, if I was in a certain way or whatever, she probably still wouldn't do. She's like, look, we need to hire somebody to come mow the lawn. I don't think she's going to go out there and do that. But I'm just saying anything can be negotiated as long as the expectations are clearly defined and agreed to.
And that's
I got no problem with if the woman comes and fixes the plate and takes the plate away without the husband asking or whatever. If all that's there, again, that is what they agree to. Now, again, it might not jive with me. Just like I've said in before, I know a situation where my one of my ex-bosses, her husband was a house husband. Like, he didn't work at all. But he took care of the house. He took care of the cats. He did the cooking. He did it. It's like the roles were reversed. And now me and my wife and I, we saw this up close because they used to invite people at their house all the time and have, company parties and stuff like that, hang out and everything. And they would just, but it worked for them. And my wife was like indignant, like, oh, I could never, if you didn't work. So I was like, so hold up. So if you were making big time money, you would have a problem with me staying home? She said, yeah, I would. Because that's the expectation. In her mind, no, you work. So again, that situation wouldn't work for her. But I said, look, it works for them. They seem to be pretty happy with that situation. Some guys, if you want to call the guy simp or whatever you want to call them, it worked for them. I got no smoke for them for that. Because again, that's what they agreed to. In their situation. So again, if in certain households where there's rules, yes, the woman cooks, cleans, or whatever. The husband, he does all the she takes care of inside the house. He takes care of outside the house, or certain things, or whatever. I got no issues with that. And as long as that's communicated, it's to me it's fine. And again, that's the thing. You don't know necessarily the conversation that they had. Maybe that was agreed to or whatever, or maybe that was, expected or talked about or something. But that's, like I said, so I'm not going to look at that situation just from the outside and say, this is,
Well, my parents, my mom used to get pissed off when he used to do that. She hated it.
Then that's a conversation that needs to be had, or a behavior that needs to be changed. A behavior that needs to be changed. Absolutely.
Yeah, they never had that conversations.
Yeah.
Like, he only cared, like, I make the money, you take care of the rest. You pay the bills, you clean the house, you do this, you do that, you do that. Like, my dad had one responsibility, my mom had 20. So it wasn't fair.
Yeah.
Like,
well, again, fair is, I would say this again, fair is what's negotiated.
Fair is also objective. Can we agree on that?
No, not this.
The reason I say objective, hear me out. Because what is fair to me into my relationship is maybe not fair to you and your relationship. It's two different environments, two different chemistry. That's why I say objective. That's fair. Because what is fair for us might not be fair in your eyes. Like, you might look at me like, yo, Pete, that's not fair. Like, it works for us, dude.
That's my only point. As long as it's working, I don't care what the arrangement. Because again, 100 years ago, that's how it was.
Yeah.
The guy you went out and you killed the. I remember I lived with my grandfather for a while when I was very small. He go out with a shotgun. You heard shots, boom, boom. Came back. He's got rabbit. He's got possum. He's got whatever. Again, this is what folks ate back then. Yeah, this.
Awesome.
They lived off the land. So again, boom, boom. He'd come in, lay it on the porch. My grandmother would come out, and she would strip them down and clean them and get them ready for the pot. He wasn't going to lift a plate. He wasn't going to wash any dishes. He wasn't going to cook anything. His thing was to provide. So he goes out there. He gets the food. He brings it back. She preps it, and she does all that stuff. He went out to the farm. He had farmland. He went out and did the farm. She did the sewing. She did the washing of the clothing. She did all those activities. And that's kind of how it was. So again, I don't mind as long as, again, is it openly communicated and expected. And again, if you feel that you cannot keep it, then have a conversation.
My grandparents, they had a better agreement to their marriage. Let's put it those words to him. Like my grandfather went to work, my grandmother worked. So they had their own responsibility. It's responsibility, and this is what we're talking about, like 40s, 50s. We're talking about now.
Mm-hmm.
And back then, if things weren't that fair, let's be straight up here. Like, man worked, woman stayed home. Simple. They figured it out. Both of them worked. Both of them put food on the table. Both of them did everything. My grandfather liked cooking sometimes. He's like a barbecue in the back.
Yeah.
So it is possible to make it work.
Oh,
very simple.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Shout out to our guy Anton, certainly in the build tonight. Jersey Strong, always representing. Appreciate you being here. Appreciate you being here tonight. And but yeah, we've been talking about divorce tonight. So again, if you guys go back, watch the replay show. We're going to make sure we end at a time where you get the replays. But again, shared a lot of stats tonight about divorce overall. One of the takeaways that I got in looking at the statistics, I know everybody likes to quote 50% divorce rate in the U.S. That may not be a true number. It's a lot less than that, and divorce rates have actually been coming down for various reasons. Some have pointed out that, people aren't getting as married as much. But again, typically, the more educated you are and the more financially stable you are, you typically lessen your chances of divorce in those particular situations. So again, it's not a 50-50 where you're just flipping a coin on whether or not you're going to be successful or not. And numbers and stats are kind of bearing that out. But we've been hearing this 50% plus divorce rate for so many years, and we just repeat it. But the numbers are a bit more nuanced than that. And these days are saying just taking data from the 90s, that rate might be more in the 30s, not pushing or over 50%. So you can go back and certainly look at some of those stats that I shared earlier. But again, divorce is put it this way, it certainly is enough to where, again, all of us have either been affected by it personally. If we haven't gone through it ourselves, we've known people who've gone through it, and certainly it definitely has impacts certainly on those around us, and that's a reality that that people have to live with. But hopefully with more information, people making better decisions about who they need to be in relationship with. And another thing for me is I'm always saying, it's like, you got to have the conversations early. I mean, the real ones, you know what I mean? And so that's definitely something that you have to, really get into nitty. A lot of people date for long periods of time, but you take years before you have the conversation. Shout out to Anton. It says the one area where divorce is high is in the military. Yeah, 75, 80%. Yeah, and again, that's a stressful situation to be under. I mean, you talk about deployments. You're talking about just long periods where you're simply not together. And so certainly that's something that, and again, now the interesting thing to me would be, and this might be a question for others to ponder, especially I'm wondering if the military is looking at this, in terms of soldier effectiveness. Like, I don't like if the military said something to the effect of, okay, well, if you're going to go into the military, if you're not married, stay unmarried, or put some incentive in, or put a rule, you cannot get married if you're in the military. Because again, I mean,
they can't do that. Actually,
I'm just spitballing. I mean, I don't know if that can or not, but I'm just saying. But if it's that high, 75-80% divorce rate for active military, again, that's got to take a toll on just your effectiveness in terms of how you do your job. I know there's a lot of compartmentalization that a soldier has to do, but with those strains, is it worth it to either to get married before you get in? Maybe you go in, you put your 2 to 5 in and whatnot, and get married afterwards, or what have you. But I don't understand, even for the soldier, if you're going to be deployed for long periods of time where you're not going to be with your spouse, why would you put a spouse through that? Again, maybe that might be a conversation where we get some more military guys to have that conversation. What's the thought process? You active military, you go into Germany, Iraq, whatever you go into. You got this girl back home. What's the and you know the numbers. What's the incentive then to want to marry in that situation? You don't even see your kids. I mean, you see your kids as babies, and you might not see them for, they're growing up, and it's like, wow, it's like, they're growing up and you're not there. I mean, so those are things maybe we can have in the future show. Maybe get some of the military guys on and talk about that.
One
what's
thing
the
I do know,
yeah.
Like I spoke to a bunch of women about this before, and one thing is that comes across the board is when they say I couldn't do that. They're married women who's saying, like, listen, if my man is, in the military, I wouldn't be doing that. It's not my cup of tea. I could not let him be gone for 6, 7, 8, 12, 18 months at a time. No way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Shout out to Anton again. Thank you for another super chat. Thank you for the blessing. The best thing I chose to do, I got married after I left the Army. And I think that's a safe thing to do. I get it. I mean, King Smith talked about, scarcity and youth. You don't want to die and feel like you were alone. But again, there's people who are going to be impacted by, let's say if you did die, then again, those people are going to have to deal for the rest of your life with your absence. And so again, is that fair to them? Knowing that you're in a dangerous position or in a war zone or whatever, potentially to be in that, is that fair to them? Again, that's definitely a question we can have for enlisted service. And King, thank you for being honest. Yes, it is selfish, but that's what a person in the service thinks, and that's why I'm asking. Like in the service itself, are there means? Are there people who counsel on, look, this sort of thing and whether it's bad or not? But listen, we're up against a hard stop because Pete's got to go to work in the morning. So again, I want to thank everybody for being certainly part of this conversation tonight. We can certainly further it. And again, I would really like to hear this with the military guys. But we're going to go certainly close out the show with our final thoughts. So again, if Pete, you want to give yours, and I'll close this out.
I'll keep it very simple. Put your wife first, not you kids. Make sure her needs are handled, and make sure you guys are on the same page. I'll keep it like that.
Yeah. And again, divorce, it is a part of life. But it has ripples for everyone involved. And just make sure you don't enter into it lightly, into marriage lightly. Make some good choices for the person that you marry. Spend some time without children first. I think those will be big aids and helps. And, to lessen the likelihood of divorce. But again, it is something that affects us all. And, so if anybody has gone through that, hopefully you have the strength to rebound and recover. And if love finds you again, then maybe you could be in that situation. But for that, for myself, Mr. Bennett, and he is...
This is Sparta!
He is the Ghost of Sparta. This is The Gray Area on the Black Man Unfiltered Network, simulcasting on the Sparta HQ Network. Until next time, take care, God bless, and we'll see you then.